Hello, my name is Lalisa Ruffin, and today I will be discussing my recent home PC office build project. The parts that were needed and that I used for this project include the above list that I'll go into detail about in the preceding slides. The PC tools that I used include a Phillips head screwdriver, which is magnetic for finding those drop screws, and an anti-wrist strap so that I won't damage any PC parts with static electricity. PC cases come in different sizes and colors. Some may look crazy and have extra fans, LED lights, or glass slide panels, or they may not have a lot of those components at all. This is, however, where all of the components will fit into once the PC build is done. The motherboard is a printed circuit board that every other computer hardware component will be attached to. It's like a hub that manages and connects all of your other parts. It has connectors for cables, such as power cables and data cables, slots for cards like GPUs, and sockets for CPUs. A CPU is the central processing unit of a computer, and without it, nothing really works. My CPU choice for this home office build is the Intel Core i3-10100. This processor has 4 cores, 8 threads, onboard graphics, and it's suitable for all software in the Microsoft Office suite. It does not require a BIOS update, and it includes a stock cooler. This CPU also includes 2 to 4 DIMM slots for up to 64 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM and a front panel USB 3 header. Every CPU type has a specific socket, and the motherboard will need that exact same socket to be compatible with the CPU. This is where the form factor really comes into play. Form factor refers to the size, shape, and physical specifications of hardware or hardware components. Also, almost everything you do on a computer will have to be calculated by the CPU in some way. So, having a fast CPU with high clocks and high core count will make your CPU faster. Random access memory, or RAM, is the short-term memory part of a computer, and you would compare it to a human brain. The RAM stores data that is actively being worked on by the CPU. RAM can read and write very fast, but it cannot retain information once the power is turned off, and a motherboard has RAM slots where RAM gets plugged into it. RAM comes in different capacities starting at around 4 gigabyte and going up to 64 gigabyte per module on modern systems, and having more modules will multiply your RAM capacity. Now, according to PCPartPicker.com, the 2x8 gigabyte kit memory that I used for this build is the best price choice within Intel's recommended specifications. The B460 chipset has a maximum RAM speed of 2666 megahertz. Higher speed memory is still compatible, but it will be downclocked to 2666 megahertz. This is the central CPU cooling fan, and I mounted it directly over the integrated circuit chip containing a computer's processing unit to prevent overheating. Having at least one intake and one exhaust fan should provide a substantial temperature decrease versus having no fans at all. This is the typical bare bones setup when it comes to fans, but anything less means you're seriously robbing the computer of cooling potential and possibly damaging its parts. So to install the cooling fan, I have fixed the back plate and threaded 4 fans through the back of the motherboard with a small amount of thermal paste onto the middle of the CPU. This quickly expands once the cooler is mounted and provides a pretty decent amount of thermal interface material to successfully transfer heat from the processor die to the cooler. Then I carefully oriented the heatsink onto the pins of the threads of the mounting plate and secured the plates in place with regular screws. After that, I reattached the fan to the tower and plugged the 4-pin PWM fan header into the CPU fan slot on the motherboard. Because RAM can't store anything without power, and we do need to be able to turn our computer off at some point, we need a storage medium that retains its stored data, even when the power is turned off. So I chose the Asus DRW-24B first. It's a power-saving drive that allows you to permanently delete the data on rewritable disks, which provides users with flexibility and efficiency in terms of multimedia data storage and sharing. Now, I've already picked a bunch of nice PC components, but nothing much will really happen without a power supply to supply the PC with power. The important thing here is to know how much wattage this PC build will need to run stable, and possibly how much will be needed in the future in case I plan on adding more components such as extra or stronger GPUs or storage drives. All of the cables have to be plugged in correctly in order to get the front on and off power buttons working properly. There's a single block located in the case that plugs directly onto the front on and off headers on the motherboard in this build. Connecting those cables in this step had to be done very gently and with patience as to not bend the pins. I also referred to my PC Builder manual to ensure that I connected the cables correctly. Next, I connected my power cables by routing them from the chassis to the motherboard. This includes connecting the 24-pin cable to the corresponding 24-pin ATX power port on the motherboard, and connecting the SATA power to one of the storage drives, and also threading the PCIe power cable through the cutout in the PSU holes so it's ready to install GPU. Speaking of the graphics card, it's up next, and its purpose is the processing of anything that has to do with visuals and outputs of these visuals, such as images, user interface, or GUIs onto a monitor. There are two main types of GPUs. There's the integrated GPU, or iGPU for short, and a discrete GPU. The integrated GPU, as the name implies, is integrated into the CPU, which means some CPUs already have a graphics chip built in, as this build does, and since this is the case, I can connect the monitor to the display adapter on the motherboard. And of course, I would need some kind of display device, such as a monitor, to be able to see what's going on. Monitors come in all kinds of sizes, colors, resolutions, and aspect ratios. I decided to go with the Asus Designo MX279HS monitor. I found it on Amazon for $189. It's 27 inches, has full HD as well as IPS LED with a 178-degree wide view. It's also frameless and has 1080p. And it has a built-in low blue light eye care HDMI VGA feature to protect your eyesight. Windows 10 is currently the leading operating system for PCs, and it's the next step in this build, which involves installing the OS onto the computer. There are several ways to do this, but I'm only discussing two here. The first way is that you can use a Win 10 DVD if you have a DVD player on your PC. But nowadays, the optical drives are pretty much becoming a thing of the past, so the OS is usually either downloaded directly from the internet, or you can use a USB stick or a thumb drive to install it that way. For this build, I just downloaded the OS directly from the internet. Finally, I can't forget the mouse and keyboard. I went with the Logitech MK550 wireless wave keyboard and mouse. I found it at Best Buy for $49.99. It wirelessly connects the computer from up to 35 feet away. Now, the keyboard features include Comfort Wave technology and a cushioned contoured palm rest, and the mouse features contoured sides and soft rubber grips, so you can comfortably type and input data for the best user experience. Yeah. So in summary, I discussed the basic build of a home office PC and described the parts and components needed for the build. I also discussed the importance of form factor and went over the compatible OS software and two ways to install it onto the PC. We are now at the end of this presentation, and this completes my brief summary of a basic home office PC build. I hope you leave feeling better informed, and I thank you for your time.